Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Jedi in Exile. I am the Norfolk Lion, joined with its Tats. How are we doing, Matthew?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. How are you getting on?
I am very, very well, thank you. So tonight we're going to be talking about the history of the Darksaber, so the kind of story that we know about the lightsaber that is on a lot of people's minds at the moment because we've just seen it in the Book of Boba Fett episode 5. If you haven't seen our review of that, get on our YouTube page and you'll be able to see a review of every single episode. But we thought while it's fresh in everybody's minds, you might have only seen the main Star Wars films, might have only just flicked through The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett. There's been quite a few references to the Darksaber, so we wanted to just fill a lot of you guys' information in really, because we know a little bit more about the Darksaber than your average fan, your average watcher. So without further ado, Matthew, please talk to me about the start, where the history of the Darksaber. So go from the beginning.
Okay, so for those that have seen Rebels, you'll be familiar. For those that have seen this kind of week's episode of
Yeah,
Book of Boba
rebels.
Fett, exactly, yeah, Rebels. You'll be familiar with some of this because it's kind of run through briefly. We're going to go into a little bit more detail than Book of Boba Fett did this week. So it all started with one man, and that is Tarre Vizsla of House Vizsla. So Tarre Vizsla was a Mandalorian from years and years and years and years and years before any of the Skywalker saga is set. And he is basically the first and only official Mandalorian Jedi. So he was picked up
Yeah, so
and
just to give a bit of context, the Mandalorians and the Jedi have had some wars, a lot of famous wars, and the Mandalorians are kind of on an equal footing with the Jedi in terms of not force ability, but actual kind of military. There's been, I think it was about 1,000 years before, no, 2,000 years before the Skywalker saga is set, and they hate each other, so they are rivals. So the fact that we talk about the first Mandalorian Jedi and the only one, it's because the Mandalorians hated the Jedi, and you'd probably say vice versa as well. As much as hate isn't for the Jedi, they were involved in two wars against each other. So it's just important that that's an important point that having a Mandalorian Jedi is not a common thing.
no. So we're about 1,000 years. Tarvis are about 1,000 years before the Skywalker saga um, is becomes the first and, as far as we are aware, only Mandalorian Jedi kind of that exists within the Star Wars lore at the moment. He is a full-on Jedi, part of the Old Republic. Um, and then basically he passes. There's a lot of ambiguity around Tarviza, so he passes, he dies, and the Jedi basically take the dark saber and they store it in the Jedi Temple, because it's this kind
Because
of
we don't really know what happens with a Jedi's lightsaber when they die.
no,
Like,
no.
I
It's
mean, what happened to Qui-Gon's lightsaber? Because is that a material that will just burn like the hilt?
so
We don't
that
really know.
I just coincidentally, and this genuinely is coincidentally, have been reading a lot of the Darth Vader comics at the moment. I'm sure some of you are aware. I've mentioned it a couple of times in the previous kind of videos that we've done, and actually in one of them, it's set between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, and Vader is has just started the Inquisitors and they're hunting down Jedi, and one of the Jedi they go after is Jocasta Nu because she survived the Purge, and she's gone back to the temple. And when she goes back to the temple,
Interesting.
there's this room that's got a whole bunch of Jedi artifacts that's like hidden away. It's a secret like vault, and that's got a bunch of lightsabers in it. So there's every possibility that that's where they're kept. Who knows? But
Okay.
it's taken back anyway. And then at some point, the Mandalorians break in, they steal it, and they take it back. And at this point, it's then handed down generation by generation by generation through the Vizsla clan. But we don't see
Yes,
any
the
of
Vizsla
this.
clan, importantly, they're the ones that steal it, aren't they? So
Yes.
you could say they feel like they've got a right to the Darksaber.
Yes. So we don't see any of this. We don't get named individuals. The next named individual that pops up is Pre Vizsla. So again, of the Vizsla clan, and he is kind of in the modern age of Mandalore. So this is about 21 years before the Battle of Yavin. So we're talking kind of Attack of the Clones era, Clone Wars type timelines. So he picks it up, and it's really important here to note that, and this is something that might be quite confusing to people that have been watching The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and not any of the other kind of pieces, but there's different factions on Mandalore during the time of the Clone Wars. So you've got kind of the general civilization that live their lives as kind of normal people. They don't all wear the armor. This is where we see people like Duchess Satine, who is kind of really infamous for the relationship that her and Obi-Wan have. And like, so these are kind of your average citizens. There's then a break off, a splinter group called Death
It's
Watch.
important. I was just going to say there's a clarification. There's a clarification between people who are born and raised on Mandalore and Mandalorians.
Yes.
So you can become a Mandalorian and not be from Mandalore. It's
Yeah.
like I suppose you'd call it a cult.
It's like a
Can we get a
religion,
picture of
right? It's like a
Previzla? Can we see him? Did we get
yeah.
something on there?
Yeah, we did.
For people who haven't, for people who are watching on YouTube, so that's Pre Vizsla. Anyone who's watched him, Clone Wars, you'll know him. Um, and yeah, so they. Well, what's interesting for me actually with this one as well is everybody talks about how you have to win the Darksaber in battle to be able to be like the true ruler, the true owner of it. Yet, if it's just passed down for generations, all the Vizslas after Tar Vizsla basically like
I guess
don't
that's
really have any
birthright.
power.
I guess that's birthright.
Yeah,
So it'd be the same
yeah,
as
yeah,
like a king, right? There are two ways to become a king or a royal. That would
yeah,
be
yeah,
family bloodline or taking it by force and proving that you're worthy that way. So it's kind of like a royalty status. That's kind of the way
yeah, yeah.
that I've seen it. Um, but we'll kind of carry on running through the history. So he's part of this group, Death Watch. Death Watch are essentially seen as terrorists by citizens of Mandalore.
Mm.
They are all about kind of bringing the old ways back, the traditional ways back, and this is where it ties nicely into the Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, because it's quite obvious that Din was definitely raised within the kind of Death Watch old Mandalorian ways, which is the not removing your helmet, all of that kind of stuff. That was quite key.
Yeah.
We touched on that a little bit in this week's episode. So we get Pre Vizsla. Pre Vizsla is challenged during the Clone Wars, and this is all covered within the Clone Wars series. So if you want to see it, it's challenged by somebody that we've got a lot of love for on this on this channel. Some of you might recognize him if I throw his face up. So this is Darth Maul.
And anyone who says who's that, get out right now.
Leave.
We don't even want you watching or listening to this. Unless you're obviously just listening and you can't see. It's a guy with a black face with red tattoos on and he's got horns coming out of the top of his head. So hopefully you can guess
So
who he is.
we've got Darth Maul. Darth Maul wins the Darksaber from Pre Vizsla, and essentially kind of seats himself. So it's him and his brother, Savage Opress, who
What a cool name.
yeah, who kind of they come in and they really like they dethrone the current kind of setup on Mandalore. They come in and they set up this this kind of group called the Shadow Collective, which we see a bit more in the latest series of Clone Wars, which is all to do with kind of trying to unite some crime families and think about the bigger picture. Features briefly, there's like a little cameo showing this kind of reach in Solo at the very end. So he wins it. He's on Mandalore, and then we get gone.
I was just going to say, you know what? The Maul taking over Mandalore, I think something that, and people I think overlook this, even Star Wars fans, that he could have kind of ruled Mandalore and been almost completely left alone. I'm going to say almost completely, because Mandalore was a neutral system in the Clone Wars, so it didn't declare for the Republic or the Separatists, and that was Satine, even though she was really close to Obi-Wan and kind of you would think her thoughts and feelings were probably more Republic led than separatist. She still remained neutral. Now, Mandalore, if Maul could have just, you know, ruled as a, a normal leader, and the armies of the Republican separatists were spread so thin that they wouldn't have really done anything to Mandalore. But of course, as you've just said, like he wasn't ever going to be like that, was he? He unites the crime families, and his story obviously goes on.
So
Um,
what we get is, and it's not necessarily pertinent to the Darksaber itself, but it kind of is a little bit contextual in regards to what you've just said. So we actually get Sidious in the Clone Wars rock up on Mandalore and fight Maul and essentially dethrone him, put him in his place. And at this point, we don't really see what happens to the Darksaber. There's then some breakaway comics.
no,
There's some breakaway comics that show Maul being imprisoned. Some key members of the Shadow Collective come and break him out, and they give him the Darksaber back. So somewhere along the lines, they've managed to like recover it. All good. So Sidious dethroned them because Sidious saw that as kind of a threat to his plans. We talked about that in our Plagueis episode, about kind of Sidious's grand plan. Was it really his grand plan? I'll let you go listen to that episode and find out. But he kind of does all of this stuff. He gets broken back out. We then pick up in the final series of Clone Wars. And during the final series of Clone Wars, Maul goes back to Mandalore. We see the siege of Mandalore, which is kind of the clones going in, and there's just all these massive battles and everything. At some point here, Maul's still got the Darksaber, and he leaves. We get the aftermath, so I'm not going to spoil the end of Clone Wars for people that haven't seen it, but essentially disappears off. And
as it is incredible.
yeah, go watch it if you've not seen it.
It's well worth the show being cancelled twice.
The Darksaber essentially makes its way to Dathomir, and rocks up. So Dathomir, obviously the home of, or the ancestral home of Darth Maul, Savage Opress, the Night Sisters, kind of all of those key people. So it makes its way back there, and then we kind of lose a little bit of its history. It's there. It's on Dathomir.
Yeah,
no one really knows what's going on. We jump forward now, and we have the introduction of a new character who's brought in and introduced to us through the series Star Wars Rebels, and it is Sabine Wren. So this is she is another Mandalorian. When we're introduced to her, she's part of the Ghost crew in Rebels, which is Kanan and Hera, Zeb, etc. And essentially, we don't know tons about kind of what happens, but a little bit of Sabine's backstory is that she's very good at creating weapons, and when the Empire come to Mandalore and kind of take it over, she gets I'm going to use the term recruited. Recruited's a very loose term because I don't think it's particularly willingly, but she gets recruited to go and create weapons for them. And during this time, the Darksaber is rediscovered on Dathomir. And she so there's a few key players here. Once she joins the Ghost crew, there's a guy called Fen Rao, who is another kind of Mandalorian from back in the day. He appears in the Clone Wars. We get Gar Saxon. So these are just a few names that are going to pop up in the story in a second, just to listen out for. So both of these guys we've seen in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
So essentially, Fen Rao helps reunite the Darksaber with Sabine Wren.
Yeah, true.
He thinks that she is essentially the person to go and lead Mandalore back to greatness. So
it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, massive. So this particular picture, for those that are watching on YouTube, is taken from, I believe, season 3 episode the Trial of the Darksaber, Trials of the Darksaber, something like that.
Yeah.
And this is Sabine training with the Darksaber, and it's actually Kanan that is teaching her. That's his lightsaber that you can kind of see in the corner there. So she decides to go back to her family, who kind of, we find out during this episode, she left because the weapons that she had been developing had been turned on her own people. She didn't realize that was going to happen, and the Empire essentially used the weapons that she developed against the Mandalorians to try and wipe them out, keep them kind of under control. She goes back to somewhere that they think she's just run away, and she's kind of disgraced. And her mother makes a deal with Gar Saxon, who is currently like the governor, I'm gonna say, of Mandalore.
He's viceroy, isn't he? Which yeah. So the Empire installs like regional governors, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To rule like different systems, and this viceroy, as you say, challenges her to combat for the for the Darksaber.
Yeah. So essentially, what happens is he brokers a deal with her mum. Her mum hands over the Darksaber in order for her being safe, and kind of Gar Saxon of the Empire saying, "Oh, don't worry, you're not a fugitive anymore. Like, yeah, come back, you're all good." He goes back on that deal, and Sabine basically goes, "Nah, pal, like, I'm gonna put you in your place." And they fight 1-on-1 out on an icy lake, and she absolutely kicks his ass, basically. And wins the Darksaber back. So she's now actually not just been given the Darksaber, she's fully won the right to use it. And actually something really key that we get here is we get the first mention about some weight to the Darksaber and why the Darksaber is so difficult to wield. So Kanan kind of goes over the fact that obviously a normal lightsaber, so the Darksaber is a lightsaber fundamentally. The crystals kind of have energy, they connect to the Force, and therefore if you have conflict, then you'll struggle to control it because you're not thinking about one thing, you've not got goal, clear mind, all of that kind of stuff. So this is where all of the history comes out about Sabine, because she's holding on to all of that stuff. She's conflicted inside as to what to do, lets it all out, and then we see all of this. It's really interesting that kind of seed was planted there, and we're now seeing that echoed within the Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian story that we're getting at the moment. I fully appreciate I've done a lot of talking, mate, so I don't know if you want to pick up the next bit of the story.
No, that's cool. Listen, you've done a fantastic job, and I've just nodded and agreed with you. So we know Sabine wins it, or she keeps it as such. She wins the duel with the Viceroy. She then actually realizes that she's not the person to unite Mandalore, that she's part of the rebellion. She wants to stay on the Ghost crew and fight the Empire. She doesn't feel like she can do that as ruler of Mandalore. So she actually offers the Darksaber to Boca Tan, which is, yeah, Matt's just illustrated her on the screen for those watching on YouTube, being handed the Darksaber. So Bo Katan features in The Mandalorian season 2. She's in quite a bit of Clone Wars. She is the sister of the ex-ruler Satine. So Sabine Wren feels like she's the person who could unite Mandalore. Now Bo Katan is kind of reluctant to accept it because she realizes that it shouldn't be given as a gift. As we see my son in the background now wandering around, who is going to go away. Rupert, go sit down. Good boy. Sorry about that, everybody, but 4-year-olds are 4-year-olds. Um, so,
We'll have him on as a
so
guest next week if we want. If people want
absolutely,
it.
listen, he will talk Star Wars till the cows come home, until the Banthas get milked. Um, so Bo-Katan doesn't really want to accept it because she realizes that it shouldn't really be given as a gift, but she does accept it. Sabine says, "You have to take this on." So Bo-Katan accepts it. So she's got the Darksaber. Everybody kind of gets on with life, and then the next time we see it is in the Mandalorian, where Moff Gideon um, suddenly appears with it at the end of season 1 of The Mandalorian. It's that famous scene. He stood on top of his TIE fighter. He's just cut his way
Cuts
out of it.
himself out,
And
right?
it was like, yeah, it was like a huge cliffhanger at the time of like, holy crap, is that the Darksaber?
And I
Like, because
think
it's the first time we see it in live action.
and I
It's really important that was a great moment.
I think this is kind of the really kind of key thing here is if you watch that as somebody that's maybe watched the movies and then you watch the Mandalorian because you're like, oh, another live action thing, let's give it a go, like looks pretty cool.
Mm.
That was an awesome ending anyway because it was such a massive cliffhanger
Yeah.
for
It's
people
like
that
a black lightsaber,
yeah
like that looks like a samurai sword.
yeah.
It's like,
And then for people that had like watched Clone Wars, watched Rebels, and seen all of this stuff going on, it was a ridiculous, like mind blowing because it was all kept under wraps. Like no one knew it was going to happen.
what I have to say, it was really hard to explain to, because I knew quite a lot of people who weren't really into Star Wars, but that were watching The Mandalorian, and it was so hard to explain why I was so excited about seeing the dark saber, because in their mind it was like, oh yeah, it's a black lightsaber, like that's different, that's cool. But I was like, you have no idea the significance of the Empire, like Moff Gideon, having the dark saber. So it was incredible. And so,
There's so many questions there, by the way, that we don't know the answer
yeah,
to, but I would
yeah,
love
yeah.
to know the answer to because I'm pretty sure that if um, Sidious knew that he had that, I think that there potentially would have been issues. So I don't know if he's doing all of this stuff like off the radar, like under wraps, kind of Operation X. It's just there's big question marks in all of the Empire like finance books as to what he's doing, and he's just allowed to go away and do stuff. But I think that's really awesome. And I think
Yeah.
it's key to say here that all we know is that there was so there's the Siege of Mandalore and the Purge of Mandalore. So the Siege of Mandalore is what we see in the Clone Wars. There's the Purge of Mandalore, which was kind of we saw some flashbacks when in this week's episode we kind of saw some flashbacks, and the Purge happened kind of. I'm not going to say under the watch of, but kind of with Boca Tan kind of having the like during the time that Boca Tan has the Darksaber, and so she's really kind of tarred with the brush of that's her fault. She wasn't rightful ruler. She was given the Darksaber, and that reluctance that she showed then and kind of what happened now really plays into what we saw in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, 'cause Din wins it from Moff Gideon, doesn't it? And again, Bo Katan gets offered it, and the reluctance that she had some reluctance the first time, but did actually accept it because she felt like she maybe could unite Mandalore. And after obviously everything you've just said with the Purge, she realizes that the history, the tradition of the Darksaber, people will only unite behind somebody who's won it in combat. And obviously Din is that. And then we see Din again at the end of season 2. We know it's probably the greatest one of the greatest Star Wars moments where Luke comes in his his X-wing, defeats all the robots, etc. Um, and then we see it again in chapter 5 of the Book of Boba Fett. And we see Din really actually using it. And I mean, I won't focus too much on it because we talk about that in our review show. But he's not very good at using it. You can definitely tell he needs training and he's a non-force user of a lightsaber. And he is actually challenged by the latest descendant of the Vizsla clan. So Vizsla is like, that's rightfully mine, challenges him to it. They have a cool fight that lasts, a few minutes in the episode, and Din manages to win it. But then well, I say win it, keep it. But then he's abandoned from the Children of the Watch because he takes his helmet off, they find out. So they banish him. And obviously that leaves us that he's gone to Tatooine, to Mos Eisley. So, but he's still got the Darksaber, so it'll be interesting to see where they take the Darksaber with this, which you think it's going to feature. We know there's going to be a Mandalorian season 3, so the Darksaber is going to feature a lot on that. Will we find out more about the Purge of Mandalore? Because that's quite a big. It's kind of that missing piece, isn't it, of the Darksaber to see like. Will we see more of Bo Katan? Um, but that's kind of where we get from 1,000 years before up to what we know about obviously the Darksaber with Din. Um,
I think it's really exciting that we we have this thread for, and we've just said, we've gone from 1,000 years before up to now, but we actually don't know that much. Um, you know, we've
I,
we've seen
there's
various
lots
people
of pieces to be filled in.
we've seen various people use it. The main kind of thing about Mandalorians is the fact that they're supposed to be these ultimate warriors, and we kind of see when Sabine's being trained to use it, she gets gifted some stuff by Fen Rao, who basically is like, these are the tools that we as Mandalorians have created to put us on a level footing with the Jedi. So the reason that Mandalorians have jetpacks is to combat the kind of advantage that Jedi have using like force jump, force push, force pull. She gets some like gauntlets, some braces that have like grapples in them that she can use, and she uses them to like pick the lightsaber up. That's supposed to be to kind of put her on a level footing with having force pull. She's got like a thing that shoots out like a repulsor wave that's supposed to be the equivalent of force push. So it's really interesting to kind of see the Sith use it. So we've seen Maul use it.
Yeah,
We've seen Mandalorians use it, and these. So even though the Darksaber started as a Mandalorian Jedi collaboration, like across like big collab, like Nike Star Wars collab.
Jedi times Mandalorian.
Yeah,
We'll
exactly.
get some, yeah,
That it's actually now being used essentially, or has been used historically and predominantly against the Jedi. So it's quite an interesting kind of dynamic to see.
yeah. No, absolutely, you're right. It's it is exciting to see that we're clearly going to know more about the Darksaber in the next, years to come. Couple of years, we know Mandalorian season 3 is going to be up towards the back end of this year, so we are going to be finding out more about the Darksaber. So yeah,
Definitely.
it's just an exciting time to look at it. But we wanted to put this video together to give people a bit more of a clearer idea about the history of the Darksaber. Hopefully, it's done that for you. So we can all be excited together about that the significance of the Darksaber being in the Star Wars universe now and the live action, the animated series. Like there's just so much more to it than we've seen just in live action.
Definitely. So that is it in a nutshell. I'm sure that we will be discussing it on our upcoming video that will be reviewing episode 6 of the Book of Boba Fett, because I'm sure it's going to feature now that we've had the return of Din. If you guys don't want to miss that, then make sure you like this video. If you've liked this video, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of the content that we've been putting out. Follow the socials that are down in the description box below and have been popping up to make sure you keep up to date with all the news that we are going to be kind of sending your guys' ways. And other than that, I think all it is safe to say is thank you very much for watching. Thank you for all the support as usual. And we will see you guys all very, very soon.
Yes. May the force be with you, everybody. Thanks for watching.